one of the fastest growing products when you look at the market breakdown of cannabis is gummies and beverages. And those two products at 10 milligrams, which is equal to a recreational product, are perfectly legal in Georgia. So for that kind of side by side, that is functions as our recreational market. Of course, the thing that we don't allow in Georgia, you can't have food. So the question comes back to, well, what is food? It's something with a nutritional value. So cookies, brownies, I don't know, cupcakes, whatever you want to make it.
Yeah.
Can't have food with cannabis. And you can't have smokable flower that's unprocessed. This is sort of a really gray area of the law, but you can't have high THC flower. And otherwise, everything else is available. I mean, we have vapes. You can't have high Delta 9 THC vapes. We have Delta 8 vapes in Georgia. We have gummies, and we have beverages, and those are really the cornerstones of a recreational market.
This is Word Out, the Park Group podcast, where we shine the light on the people shaping Georgia's future. From business leaders to bold thinkers, local legends to movers and shakers on the rise. These are the people who don't just dream big, they build big. From the boardroom to the backroads, Word Out shares the stories behind the work, the ideas behind the growth, and the people behind it all. Brought to you by the Park Group, offering creative marketing solutions that help people get the word out about their business, service, or event. From web design and social media to complete omni-channel campaigns that create top-of-mind awareness. Contact the Park Group for AI-assisted marketing that gets results. Online at theparkgroup.net.
Sarah Nicholls.
Hello.
How are you?
Making it.
Good. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot to talk about. I'm glad that you're one of the first guests that we have, because I think this is one of those topics that a lot of people are confused about, and a lot of people would like to know more about it. I'm confused about it, and I know a little bit about it just from working with you and talking to you in the past. So I thought, to get started, I would read off your bio from your LinkedIn page, which you said you did a while back, maybe. It's been a while.
Yeah, I don't know what it says, so I'm interested.
Okay. I'm technically trained microbiologist with a unique ability to execute high-level solutions and drive innovation. I believe great science begins with the ability to connect disparate ideas through observation, materializes by accurately executing well-designed protocols, and ends with articulate data analyzation. My skill set and professional experience is a reflection of the aforementioned components invaluable in R&D innovation, analytical testing, and quality engineering. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, one of my strongest skill sets is that I can see the world differently, and I'll credit my ADHD for that one. But I connect disparate ideas. So where other people see A plus B equals C, I see A plus Z coming back to B and C, or something like that. Like, I just connect ideas that maybe weren't apparent to other people. And that makes me creative and innovative. It allows me to look at processes that maybe haven't been explored before. And because my thoughts are jumping all over the place at all times, I just find these little bridges between them. And that's why I did so well in science. Okay. Because it was a frontier that I could explore. So
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Now that makes perfect sense. So I was looking in there, and you started in the kaolin.
Well, originally I started in the placenta business. Well, even before that, I was in university stuff. But my very first job out of undergrad was with this lady named Sophia Banton. She became my first mentor, and I worked prepping coursework for the labs for that college, and specifically worked in micro. And then she came to me one day and said, I needed to get out of there, and I needed to go to grad school, and drop the application on my desk. So I did that. I picked a program at Georgia State. I did it in a year, and then went back out into the professional world. I did some tissue processing, like I said, with a placenta company, and then ended up in kaolin, which is really my first opportunity to kind of get out of the rigor of monotony of somebody else's work and start to create things. And met my next mentor, Stacy Johnson, out in Sandersville, and Ken McDonald. So they showed me the HPLC and the GC, which is the foundation of the business I do now, and saw some of my potential.
So from kaolin to cannabis, how do you make that
From
leap?
placenta to cannabis.
Placenta
Yeah, I mean,
to cannabis.
or yeah, placenta to cannabis. Science, we have specialties in science, of course, but it's more about the ability to apply the scientific method. I mean, that's something you start learning in elementary school, and it really is that simple. People who are good at it can apply it across the board. When I was working in kaolin, we were doing quality management to see that we needed kaolin to stay white. So we added something called biocides, which stopped bacteria from growing. We analyzed those biocides on HPLC. And again, that's the foundation work for what we do now. So that was my introduction to analytical chemistry. I also worked on a micro project on a patent that we applied for, and I came up with the molecular process for that. So the micro world I already had from my previous experience. Then I learned analytical chemistry, and it really is just one of those God moments that my experience came together to put me at a really historical time, the opportunity to do cannabis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you brought some samples? Right? No, I'm just kidding.
I probably do somewhere. I don't know. I'd have to dig in my purse, but.
So let's just dig into this cannabis world now. And you know, like I said, I think there's a lot of confusion out there, and there's so many different products out there on the market now. Mm-hmm. And I think you're sort of being an innovator in the state as far as trying to educate people, really, because there's not been a lot of education going on about this. And I think everybody's just confused, really. There's so many different components to it. What's the difference between hemp and cannabis?
So cannabis is the umbrella term. It's cannabis sativa is the genus and species of what we grow and understand as hemp and marijuana. The difference between hemp and marijuana is an arbitrary value that's set in law. So 0.3% delta 9 THC or total THC is very arbitrary. Cannabis is the more appropriate term to use. There is, back in the 70s, when Nixon started his war on cannabis, they made a point to have marijuana be racially identifying, and it's sort of a racist word in the history of how marijuana came into our the word came into our country. So when I talk about cannabis, and to me there isn't a difference between the two other than when I report to the state that this passes or fails. But from a science standpoint, there's not much difference.
So of all the products that are out there, which ones are, I mean, what's being sold illegally out there right now? I mean, in these stores, I've always wondered, you know, you have these CBD stores, and I'm like, what's in there? What am I buying, and who's really monitoring this?
It'd be fun to go into a CBD store, and we can kind of talk through all the products. But a lot less is being sold illegally right now in Georgia. Commissioner Harper, who is our Department of Ag commissioner, he was elected in 2022, I believe. Took office in 2023, maybe. Anywho, he's put a lot of effort into the hemp program. SB 494 is a bill that his department worked really hard on. It was a very comprehensive bill to get regulations introduced to the state to take this wild west of hemp, try to put it back into Pandora's box, and then have a regulated industry come out of it.
Now that's what happened back in October, or?
October. They had a grace period till January, and now that grace period has expired. So the Department of Ag is going around to shops and enforcing these new regulations. In short, it's a more specific set of standards and testing standards that manufacturers have to do for their product to be sold to the end consumer.
So the Department of Ag is going around to how many cannabis or CBD stores are there in Georgia now that are
Thousands.
aren't flying under the radar, I guess?
Yeah, we have thousands. That was another part of the law. Everybody had to register. So before SB 494, the only people we knew operating in the hemp space in Georgia were our farmers. And we had one manufacturer with an active license at that point. But this new bill required everyone to register. So labs, manufacturers, farmers, processors, retail shops, and distributors. So now the Department of Ag really knows who's in the space. It's in that like 4,000. It's a lot. It's a huge industry. And for the purposes of Georgia, in a lot of ways, our hemp industry serves as our recreational cannabis industry. One of the fastest growing products when you look at the market breakdown of cannabis is gummies and beverages. And those two products at 10 milligrams, which is equal to a recreational product, are perfectly legal in Georgia. So for that kind of side by side, that functions as our recreational market. Of course, the thing that we don't allow in Georgia, you can't have food. So the question comes back to, well, what is food? It's something with a nutritional value. So cookies, brownies, I don't know, cupcakes, whatever you want to make it.
Yeah.
Can't have food with cannabis. And you can't have smokable flour that's unprocessed. This is sort of a really gray area of the law, but you can't have high THC flour. And otherwise, everything else is available. I mean, we have vapes. You can't have high Delta 9 THC vapes. We have Delta 8 vapes in Georgia. We have gummies, and we have beverages, and those are really the cornerstones of a recreational market. We also have pre-rolls. They're just Delta 8 or THCP pre-rolls in Georgia.
I had heard where the beverages may not be allowed anymore in Georgia at one point. Was that?
There was a bill that was introduced in session. We have, our legislator in Georgia is predominantly Republican. But even in the Republican Party, there's a really steep divide between how people feel about cannabis. With like Matt Brass, for example, he introduced some legislation to expand medical cannabis, and he was a strong advocate. He actually wanted to do more. And his bill did really well. It didn't get all the way through the finish line, but it did really well, all things considering for the type of policy that it was changing. And he's a Republican. On the flip side, you have people like Senator Randy Robertson or Representative Cooper, who really hate cannabis. And it's not to say anybody's opinion is right or wrong. It's still somewhere that you can have an opinion. But the market's here, and so we have to figure out how to regulate it. Their solution was based on the information that they had, specifically Senator Randy Robertson. He understood that beverages were as intoxicating. I think he said 4 shots of liquor, which is really asinine, completely incorrect. I've drank the beverages, and I don't drink alcohol, and I promise you if I drank 4 shots of liquor, like, we'd be having a different conversation. That's not what it is. And that was the information he presented, and so he made an amendment to Senator Calvert's bill that would eliminate beverages. That completely failed. So it's really interesting. There's a lot of cannabis conversations happening at the legislative level. This year, nothing got across the finish line. But you can tell that they're in it. I think as we continue to, there's an age gap too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would imagine so.
And I think as you continue to have, particularly your millennials, move more into those representative and senator spots, I think we'll see that shift in policy for Georgia coming within the next election cycle.
Yeah, when you were talking about the ones that were really opposed to it, I wanted to ask you how old they were.
So they are slightly older. One of them comes from a medical background. You typically get kind of two types. You have your medical person, and I kind of get they don't want people smoking. I get that. My dad has COPD and emphysema from smoking. I understand the health risk. That's why education is so important. But Randy Robertson comes from a GBI background.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah, that
he
makes
has
sense.
a little different take on cannabis. Even then, in law enforcement, you have a really distinct divide. You're either for it or against it. And you really see this age division there. So.
Yeah, I guess it may have something to do with just the way people were raised and what they believe in, or some of their beliefs
Stigmas,
maybe.
misinformation,
Stigmas.
going back to the 70s, and that racial connotation that we attach to marijuana and the type of person who was consuming marijuana. It was your hippies, your blacks, and your Mexicans, and that was what the government put out. It was very intentional.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's lots of history on on how they approached marijuana. Super intentional, the stigmas that were created. And we know now that that's not true information. We know that somebody doesn't smoke weed and become addicted to meth, right? Like, that's not how that works. But re-educating people, certainly age is a factor, experience is a factor, and it's just part of education.
So where are you finding that the most confusion is? I mean, and just within the general public and even within law enforcement?
Oh, geez. You got to give me categories there.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess so.
Let's start with general public.
Yeah, just general public.
They don't know whether it's legal or not. So the big question is cannabis legal in Georgia? And the answer is, for the most part, yes. There's a recreational outlet equivalent in our hemp market that's perfectly legal. And there's a medical side, which has even stronger products. I wouldn't say it's like super easy to get a medical cannabis license as a patient. It's certainly attainable. You can do a virtual visit, talk to a doctor, tell them what your diagnosis is, share with them your diagnosis. Dr. Vaughn here in Macon does medical cannabis patient registrations. So it's definitely attainable. We have some great products out there. But yes, it's legal. It is a thriving market. I mean, we're talking about, from the hemp side, thousands. I mean, the last time I checked, and this was months ago, 4,000 plus applicants. We've got a market here.
Yeah.
However you want to term it. So the first question is cannabis legal? Yes. The second question is, well, how do I know what I'm getting is legal or not? And probably people aren't like me where they're just going through and reading laws. I quite enjoy reading laws. Makes me a weird person, probably. But unfortunately, there were a lot of people in this space who took it upon themselves to misinform the public intentionally, because if they could say something was legal, they could sell their product and make a lot of money, even though it put that end consumer at risk. So what is legal? It has to have a total THC of 0.3% or less. It cannot have more than 10 milligrams of Delta-9 THC.
All right, hold on right there. Hold on, while I'm thinking about it. Now, 0.03 milligrams per
0.03% or 3 milligrams per gram, or 10 milligrams total per unit.
Okay. So
So you can't eat a gummy that's more than 10 milligrams per gummy, and more than, I think, 200 milligrams per package. So 20 gummies at 10 milligrams.
So that's where the people get in trouble with these drinks, right? Because they're drinking the whole thing, where they probably should just drink a little bit of it to get the same effect that they would get off of.
Well, drinks are made per serving. So a whole drink, 12-ounce can, 16-ounce can will be your 10 milligrams.
Okay.
Or 5 milligrams. They're sold in 5 and 10 milligrams. So yeah, you can consume the whole thing. It cannot be sold, so you can't buy more than 20 of those in one package. They have to be split up, per unit. And all of this information can be found on the certificate of analysis. So the other question is, well, what do we do in cannabis? I provide the certificate of analysis.
Okay.
And if you're a consumer and you're interested in engaging with this industry, the first question you ask in a shop is, after you've asked for your product, can I see the certificate of analysis?
Say that again.
If you walk into a shop and you're engaging in this industry, after you've asked the shop for whatever product you want, you need to ask for the certificate of analysis. There's a few things you need to check. You need to make sure that it's dated within the last year. You need to make sure that it's from a lab that you've heard of, understand, or is registered with the state if you really want to do your due diligence. SJ Labs is registered with the state of Georgia. So, but you're gonna check that lab is registered, and then you're gonna be looking at that total THC value in percent. Is it less than 0.3%? And the COA will say it very clearly, total THC, it'll give you a percentage. They all do. Less than 0.3%. And then what are your milligrams? So check the packaging. If they're selling you a package that says these are 10 milligram Delta-9 gummies, then that COA should say there are 10 milligrams of Delta-9 in each gummy. Plus or minus 10%, right? So if you get, there's 9 milligrams or there's 11 milligrams, that's okay. That's a representative label to the COA. But you need to be checking that. Looking for batch numbers. So one of the ways you can tell whether a company is doing the testing they're supposed to be doing is does the batch number on that COA match the batch number on the package. Now out west, this is really tightly regulated. So the state's involved. The state is getting all the COAs. The state is approving shipments to go to dispensaries. They have already done that legwork of checking the batch numbers, but we are 10 years behind here. And so a lot of this groundwork is going to be left to the end consumer and understanding what it is that they're purchasing. And then the retail shops have a responsibility for the products that they're carrying to make sure they're following the law and that they are accurately representing those products to their consumers.
So when the Department of Ag goes in to these dispensaries or shops and they don't have a certificate, what are they doing? Are they shutting them down right then and there?
They're pulling the products. They're doing a couple things. If there's a certificate of analysis and they have conflicting information or it doesn't seem accurate, they will pull that and they're getting it tested. They will pull products and dump it in the trash. They're giving warnings. Commissioner Harper has made it clear that he doesn't want to shut this industry down. He wants to give it an opportunity to come into compliance. And that's what his enforcers are doing. And the word said to me is they are going for the low-hanging fruit right now. So things that are illegal. They used to sell something called THCA flower. It is the same as recreational marijuana. That's a whole different train of thought of how that got onto our market. But THCA flower is explicitly super illegal here in Georgia. So if a shop is advertising selling THCA flower, well, that's a good place for enforcement to go and hit. If a shop hasn't registered with the Georgia Department of Ag and they're in that location that day and they see this shop that's not on their list, that's a good location to go and hit. So right now they're going for the low-hanging fruit. But consumers should be aware, and shop owners should be aware that they are enforcing. And there is a responsibility for all of us as this law is changing to be aware as we're engaging in the industry. I also, kind of back to the certificate analysis, you also want to make sure that you're looking at pesticides, mycotoxins, microbials, residual solvents. Those are your safety panels, and heavy metals. They all have to pass. So one of the issues that we've seen from enforcement is that somebody got a COA. The pesticide says failed, or the heavy metals failed. And the shop owner didn't look at the COA. They just put the product on their shelves. So when Georgia Department of Ag comes through and they're like, well, show me your COA, it says fail. Any of those fail, that product can't be sold. So just a note for the COA, it's not just the THC, it's all of your safety panels as well.
And all of those can come through your lab to get tested.
Yes,
and that's what you
course.
do.
That's what we call, that is our product. We sell COAs. Let me take that back. We sell unbiased, independently tested COAs.
Okay. All right. So how about, I know at one point you had mentioned that you even have like people in law enforcement contacting you, asking you questions about I don't know, regulations or laws or what, there's just confusion out there, even in law enforcement.
Yeah. So it's interesting because the Georgia Chief of Police and the GBI, Chief of Police and the Sheriff Association have really different takes on cannabis. One's a lot more flexible than the other. But both of those were actually really supportive of this bill that came in to play, this SB 494. And the reason was because it finally offered groundwork. One, it kind of took the enforcement off of them, gave it to the Georgia Department of Ag. And two, it built out from, I think our rules and regs now are 50-ish pages, plus or minus some, which is a lot more clarity to the law than we had before. It gives a lot more clarity to law enforcement. They're not trying to read between the lines and tying back definitions from our federal law to our state law to our rules and regs, which is what they've had to do in court up to this point. So they have been super supportive. The big question that we got the most was, what was the value that mattered from a illegal standpoint? It's always been total THC in the state of Georgia. It's 0.3% total THC. That was cleaned up. The language was cleaned up in 494. It makes it even more clear. That's been the biggest question is whether was this product illegal or not. Another was, does Delta 8 count towards that 0.3%? It does not. It is only Delta 9, THC, and THCA, and that combination is your value of legal or illegal. And cops are getting a lot better with it. A big challenge was who was going to be the first to court. And as the court kind of decides some of these cases, we get even more clarity for law enforcement and prosecutors.
It's just going to have to work itself out through the court system eventually, so the rules will be written in the courts as they happen, as they know what rules to write.
That's right. What judgments to make based on the rules that we write, and the legislator and how the legislator moves in this law, in this space. Again, I think there's still a group of legislators who are fighting to have this completely out of Georgia. But you cannot take this industry out of Georgia successfully. You can't reintroduce prohibition at this point. The only way to move forward is to make laws that work for law enforcement, for the industry, and for the consumer.
Well, I was thinking back when you're talking about the state of California and how the state is involved. How much money are they making by being involved in this? How much money does Georgia stand to lose by not? I mean, like you said, the genie can't be put back in the bottle at this point, but if they didn't go down this path, I mean, how much money is being, left on the table by the way it was?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what the most recent figures are, billions in tax dollars that these states have made per year. But coming back into Georgia's market, those hemp licenses cost anywhere from $50 per acre up to like $10,000 for the top license you can get in Georgia. So let's just cut that number in half and say your average license is about $5,000, $2,000 to $5,000 to register to compete legally in cannabis just for hemp in Georgia. And you have over 4,000 applicants. The state has pulled in millions of dollars just from registrations since October. That doesn't include our taxes that's going to come out of this industry. It doesn't include, just your consumer sales that's in this industry. We're just talking about registration fees in millions of dollars for the state right now. And then on the flip side, you have your medical licensees. They had to pay $1 million to the state just to be able to file their application. That brought in a lot of money to the state. Now, our medical industry in Georgia is really hampered right now. We really need that expansion. The patients are asking for expansion and better access. I think we see that policy move next year. But medical, when you introduce inhalables, that industry starts to really explode for Georgia. And patients need it. So for some figures for that, in Florida, I actually have the numbers on my phone because I sent in an email the other day. When they expanded medical, they have a very similar approach to medical that we do in Georgia. Expanded it to vapes. Their registrant list grew, I want to say it was like 120% in a year. An astronomical amount. And then the next year it continued growing another 80%. So these huge figures, you see patients come in swarms to register. Georgia only has 30,000 patients right now registered, or somewhere in that 25 to 30,000 patients registered. And about 1 in 4 Georgians actually qualify for medical cannabis. So a lot of people not getting access to products that can help them, whether that's because they don't know about the program, they don't know how to register, it's too restrictive of a program for them. One of the big problems we heard about was patients who were dying before they could get their medical card from the state, because at one point you were having to drive to a Department of Health, and somebody who is in terminal condition is obviously not hopping in a car and driving to the Department of Public Health. It was difficult to register caretakers. A lot of issues that we kind of got to figure out there. But unfortunately, again, we have this group in the legislature who think, oh, well, more access is just passing out weed to everybody. And it's not. Diversion isn't coming out of the medical industry. It's coming out of the black market. So,
I mean, I've personally known several people that could have benefited from something. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it is, or how they would have gotten it even. And they don't know. And they don't, they didn't even know that they could. But these, most of these people are older, and there's a little stigma involved with that too.
Absolutely. So my husband's grandparents are in their 80s, and his grandfather passed away 2 years ago from Parkinson's. He was the warden, the regional warden for the prisons here in the state of Georgia. Women's prisons, maybe? I don't know. Anyways, something high up in the prisons. And near the end, when he was in hospice, he wasn't eating. He didn't feel good. They ended up starting with THC rub, and he was able to get up and move about. And that was the first time his grandmother was like, oh, wait, this stuff works. And she sort of bought into it. And this is about the time that COVID happened, because our business started when COVID hit. So his 83-year-old, raised in the South her whole life, preacher goes into the hospital with COVID. She calls up to the hospital to tell him that he needs to be using the CBD product to get better. So she really became a believer. And, I hear a lot of stories about that. When people really get into a position where they benefit from it and they try it, they realize that it's not this gateway or this stigma drug that they've been told their whole life that it was. And the only way to change people's opinion is either they've got to be at the bottom in the worst position of their lives, willing to try anything, and they do it and they see it, or just from education or seeing it happen to somebody else. And we hear stories like that all the time, but the general public isn't, or people are still afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your business in particular for a minute, being the first
and only registered
cannabis lab in Georgia.
That's right.
So you took a little chance there, maybe.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was young. I was 28 when I started this, so I had a lot less to lose.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I didn't quite know how bad it could go. Yeah. I'd kind of had it where I was at. I had a project. It had a really $2 billion market potential for a product that I had really done the brain work for.
Oh.
And some other people got credit. And I was the youngest at the table. I was the only girl at the table. And what I said always had to be validated by somebody else.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I got home. I was really frustrated. My husband at the time was not my husband, but I'm just kind of venting about this. And he's like, just give him an ultimatum and leave. He was like, it's fine. That's fine. And I was like, okay. So I went into work and I was like, you know, this guy's putting his name on my project. He's telling me to do the work and then tell him what to say. And he's getting paid a lot more than me. So pay me what you're paying him, or I'm leaving. And I left. So that was in October. Had Thanksgiving and Christmas with my family. And then January 7th, the rules were finalized for hemp. This had already been a business plan kind of in the background of something I was working on.
Okay.
So again, this was one of just a God's moment
Yeah.
of like,
It just landed on you, huh?
yeah, this is perfect. I quit my job because they were not doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I left. I didn't know what was next. And then here's this thing I'd kind of been wanting to do. And here's God, like, here's your door wide open for you. And I knew I didn't want to work for anybody else.
Yeah.
So
Well, good
took
for
the
you.
risk. And my
And here you
daddy
are.
was very supportive and paid for the instrumentation in the beginning. So
Wow.
he's my investor.
Good daddy.
Yeah.
I've got some questions over here, and we'll start wrapping this up because I know we've been going for a little while here. These are questions that people ask on Google. So
Okay.
these are common questions that people have. So Google finds these questions, they puts about. So this is what people are asking about.
All right.
But the first thing I wanted to look at was the wiki on cannabis in Georgia, because it puts this right at the top. I wish I could put this on the screen, but I can't do that yet. And it says cannabis in Georgia is illegal for recreational use, but decriminalized in the cities of Atlanta, Savannah, Macon, Athens, and others.
Okay. So definitions are really important here. What are we defining as recreational use? Because my definition of recreational use is like if you're going to the bar and having a beer. Like that's a recreational use of alcohol. You don't need it. It's not necessary. It helps you socialize, helps you feel better. You are intentionally consuming this product to have a lift effect. You are recreationally consuming this alcohol product. Fair definition. So same for cannabis. We are intentionally consuming a product for an effect outside of a medical necessity. And from that definition, recreational cannabis does have some legal pathways in Georgia, particularly with gummies and beverages and pre-rolls.
What it makes me think about is, I hear people all the time, and even when I'm driving down the road, I can smell it. Somebody's smoking it somewhere, and they're like, well, this, if they only have a certain amount on them, it doesn't matter. It's not illegal unless you have a certain amount of, and I guess that's just up to the discretion of the municipality or the
decriminalization versus legalization. And let's talk about those terms. Legalization means that there is an intentional, regulated industry that is operating within the confines of the law in our state, or whatever that bounds is. That's something like Colorado or California, or our hemp industry is a legalized, there's a set bounds of law for what that operates in. That is a legal form of cannabis consumption. Decriminalization is we're just going to kind of turn our heads and not talk about it. So that's like in Bibb County, I believe it's decriminalized. In Atlanta, it's decriminalized. If you're not trafficking it, you're not on their radar. But in things like legalization, why legalization is better than decriminalization is because there is never a path forward in gray area. Business cannot succeed in gray area. We have to operate within banking walls, merchant services. All of our money today is processed digitally, or vast majority of it. So we come under fire from federal regulations, banking regulations, merchant services. If you're operating in the gray area, you haven't educated the consumer, the swath of consumer. You've only convinced a group who is willing to operate within the gray area. They're not able to walk into a shop. You're not able to talk in the daylight about this product because decriminalization is still not okay. There is still a limit at which the government decides it no longer is okay with it. It just means that we've kind of turned our head. So the path forward for cannabis is legalization, for which regulatory is the cornerstone. And that's the part of the market that we serve.
No gray areas, black and white.
It needs to be black and white. That's how business succeeds. So, if I told you that for your marketing business, I don't even know how marketing could ever be gray area, but you have ethics and they're pretty clear. You either can do this or you can't do that. If I told you at some ambiguous point you've crossed the line, but I can't tell you what that point is, how are you ever going to plan your business?
Yeah.
And that's what decriminalization is.
Okay. Makes sense now?
Sure.
All right, here's some more. Can anyone buy from a dispensary in Georgia?
Got to come back to terms. Yes, there are cannabis dispensaries in Georgia. We have a medical dispensary and we have hemp stores. I believe part of our law is that you can't call it a low THC oil. I don't remember if you can call it a dispensary or not. But anybody in Georgia over the age of 21 can walk into a hemp store and purchase cannabis products. And as long as those are being sold within the confines of the law that's currently operating, you have not broken any law and you are consuming recreational cannabis.
Is CBD legal in all 50 states?
Yeah, that's the Federal Farm Act of 2018. So nobody really has a qualm about CBD. It's more the THC side.
Okay. What states sell the most cannabis? Do you know?
Probably California or Colorado.
Yeah.
Probably, I'd say Colorado. Is Colorado or California top? Oregon's going to be on there somewhere too. I don't know. Most of the states in the U.S. have recreational programs now. We're not in 2016 anymore. So in my mind, this idea came out in 2016 and the only recreational program around was Colorado. And it sort of set the gold standard for how cannabis rolls out across the country. And Oregon sort of set the gold standard for how medical cannabis was going to roll out across the country. I don't know. It's changed now. We have pretty much everywhere, except for the South, has
most of these questions
fully open and accessible.
Yeah. Most of these questions are about, which state sells the most, which has the cheapest, what states sell cannabis. Looks for people looking to see if they can buy it, I guess. But this is funny here, Con. Which state is the most expensive to buy cannabis? And it says the District of Columbia holds the record for the highest price per ounce of high-quality marijuana in the United States.
Yeah, I can see that. High cost of living in general.
Yeah. Recreational cannabis is not illegal.
It's interesting, though, coming back to legalization, 60% of criminal enterprise is funded by black market marijuana. And legalizing cannabis, legal cannabis is cheaper to buy than black market. And so by leaning into legalization and a regulated industry, you're intentionally reducing exposure to people who are underage because you've added in requirements of age to purchase. You no longer have children, and that's one of the common threads of addiction is early exposure before that age of 14. So you don't have children going to the black market. If a kid is going to engage in cannabis, In those teenage years, they're going to do it. Now, would I rather them get it from their dad's medicine cabinet or from the black market? And I would 100% rather them get it from their dad's medicine cabinet. So the black market, their business plan is to get them addicted to something else. It doesn't mean it's good, and I certainly don't condone minors using cannabis, but what we've seen is we reduce minor exposure in regulated industries. And then we're taking the money away from the black market. And ultimately, they operate in violence often. Things that are criminal behavior leads to a path of violence. And regulated cannabis doesn't have that violence associated with it. And it's taking away 60% of the criminal enterprise's business.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that, how it will affect the actual criminal enterprise and crime in certain areas, how it'll go down.
Yeah, and there's
theoretically.
And it's funny because people pick and choose the metrics that they use to present this case. So, for example, in the legislature, you'll hear people say, the DUIs have gone through the roof in places where cannabis is legal. Well, it's not necessarily true. So places, we're changing how we measure it. So in places like Montana, we now measure DUI with cannabis as your active Delta-9 value. And it's equivalent to like one joint, that you've smoked a joint and then gotten behind the wheel of a car. Anything over that, your DUI. They've actually quantified it. And so, of course, we're getting more cannabis DUIs because we now have a method to test it and quantify it. That's part of regulation. Some of the other arguments is, well, more people are going to rehab in states where this is legal. I don't think that's a bad thing. We haven't seen the prevalency of addiction rise in states where this is legal. We've seen people getting more help. We've seen more rehab places opening. Addiction is a disease. It is not an individual failure. It's not a decision of somebody's morality. It is a disease. And people, it begins to present itself based on the rate of exposure, the age of exposure, and the strength of the exposure. In places where it's legal, we're talking about it. Hey, how often are you smoking? Oh, I'm smoking once a week, where I smoke with my friends. Oh, I'm smoking all day long, every single day. In a world where it's not legal and we're not talking about it, we would never understand that that's perhaps abnormal behavior. And I look back at AA. So Bill W. started AA at a time when prohibition for alcohol was ending and it was becoming more mainstream. And doctors started talking about how to treat alcoholism, defining what alcoholism was. And up to that point, it wasn't. In fact, at that point, it wasn't even thought that women could be alcoholics. So if we don't talk about it, we never get a solution to defining what is problematic. So all that's to say, when we're discussing criminal behavior or DUIs or recovery, it isn't that legalization has created these problems. It's that legalization has taken the veil away. And we're finally able to have honest conversations. And people can talk about their drug use in an environment where they don't feel judged. And that leads to people who need recovery help seeking that out.
Yeah, it's almost, I always thought, they won't legalize marijuana until there's a way to test it like people driving, It's like a DUI. They can test you on the spot and know whether you've been drinking or not.
It's still a blood test, but yeah.
It's still a blood test, but there's no way to test it like a breath test or something where they can do it right on the spot.
So there's probable cause. Just like alcohol, your breath test on the scene isn't your evidence. The blood test is ultimately the real evidence. But there's probable cause to do that. Did you not walk in a straight line? Whatever. Did the officer smell? I don't know.
Yeah. No,
so
that makes sense.
Not an attorney. But yeah, it's ultimately a blood test. It's just previously blood tests have tested for the metabolite because marijuana was illegal completely according to law. If you had it in your system, You were therefore breaking the law. It didn't matter whether you were at that time intoxicated or not. And the question now is, are you intoxicated at the time, or had you consumed it previously? And that's what the active test that Montana's using does.
Oh, okay. How do these companies, like beverage companies, like beer companies, alcohol companies, how are they dealing with this now? They're probably, because these are huge companies that own multiple brands. I'm sure they're moving into that direction with.
They would love to. They do not have the opportunity in Georgia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so alcohol in Georgia operates off of a 3-tier system. I am not an expert in alcoholic beverages, but there are nuances in our law that does not allow alcohol participants in the state of Georgia to participate in the hemp industry, for hemp beverages specifically.
That's interesting. But they can do it in other states.
Not sure.
Not sure. All right.
But, alcohol is, it's different. And generally they are kept separate. But yes, alcohol would love to get access to the beverages, and they are fighting really hard. They have some lobbying. And I agree with some of their points, and I disagree with other of their points. I've had conversations with some of their lobbyists. But I don't work in the alcohol industry, and so I don't know all the details of how that 3-tier system works. But I do know they can't right now. They would love to.
Yeah.
And that is a fight currently happening.
Yeah, and they're working on it, right?
They're working on it. Absolutely.
They just hadn't come up with enough money yet, but they will.
Oh, they're one of the largest lobbying groups in Atlanta. So I don't think money is the factor.
Yeah.
Policy change takes a lot, several sessions, years. And we're on the cusp of a lot of policy change. My prediction is next year, the bill that Matt Brass presented, which was going to allow 50% Delta-9 THC vapes for the medical industry, I think that, if not even a little bit further, is going to get through session next year. You've got a whole year to educate people on this coming up. I think that has a really good shot of getting through. Hemp regs took 2 years to get through. It took some cleaning up. It took a lot of education. So when you're really shifting monumental policy, it either comes in really small pieces over several years, or it takes several years of trying, failing, perfecting, and reintroducing. So I think we get medical expansion next year. I'm on the optimistic side. I think we get a pretty much a full medical or full recreational program in the next 3 to 5 years. Mm-hmm. And definitely in 7 years, I think we start to look like a baby Colorado.
Well, that's a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Especially for somebody who owns a laboratory that tests THC and hemp products.
I mean, ultimately, we're here for consumer safety.
Yeah.
And I have no skin in the game. I do not care what adults do. As long as they are appropriately educated, they know what it is that they're purchasing. They're not being lied to. They are intentionally making a decision to consume what it is, which requires education. And that it's ultimately a reasonably safe product. Mm-hmm. That's all I want to do to serve the industry. I think there is a use for cannabis, and I think people have the right to make that decision to use it or not. I tell my 2.5-year-old all the time, because she's in this phase where when daddy sings, she likes to tell him to stop. And I tell her all the time that we can't tell daddy to stop singing because it doesn't affect you. And if it doesn't affect you and you're not being harmed, you don't get to tell somebody else what to do. And that's my approach to life in general.
Yeah, well, I like that approach. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
It's kind of like wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, with one caveat, the person in the car gets to make a decision for seatbelt. Have you ever seen the videos of somebody getting a wreck without a seatbelt, and they're coming in from, like, they are in the back seat, and they come over like a bowling ball and, like, hit the person in the front seat and kill them?
Oh, well, no,
they become a projectile object in the car. So I don't care what somebody else is doing in their other car, but
Yeah.
in my car, we're wearing our seatbelt.
Right, but if I'm by myself, in my car, I'm
If you want to
driving
go out
down the
the front,
road,
if you want to go through the front windshield,
and I want to, I don't want to be trapped in my car with my seatbelt stuck, and it's bursting anyway.
if you want to go through the front windshield, I think, there's some good public safety procedures, but for the most part, if you want to kill yourself, go right ahead.
Okay. Well, Sarah, thanks for coming in and doing this. This has been very informative, and you are truly a pioneer in what you're doing. And I think it sounds like you're in the right place at the right time, and I wish you all the best. And is there anything else that you want to say that, that people ask that I didn't ask?
I think I want to leave people, and particularly people in Georgia, with this, that cannabis is legally, safely accessible in our state, that our programs are continuing to grow, and that as long as we continue to operate within the confines of that law, our state legislator is going to continue to allow our program to grow. When the ocean rises, all the boats rise with it.
Yep.
So as long as we're doing the right things, we're going to keep growing. And I encourage Georgia consumers who are interested in cannabis, I definitely encourage doing your own research. Go to our website, get some of your questions answered. Go to the Georgia Department of Ag and see who are some registered retail shops. Go visit them. Look, the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to sit on your couch for a couple of hours. Like, it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Go engage in cannabis if you're curious. If you don't want to use it and you're just curious about what's happening, go to our website, answer some of your questions, go to the Georgia Department of Ag. And let's move this industry forward.
Yeah. Awesome. sjlabsandanalytics.com. Sarah Nicholls, thanks a lot for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
All right. We'll see you next time.
This has been Word Out, the Park Group podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, share it, leave a review, and make sure you're subscribed for more conversations with the people moving Georgia forward. Word Out is produced locally and sponsored by the Park Group, helping Georgia business leaders get the word out with AI-assisted marketing that gets results. Learn more at theparkgroup.net.